People die in wrestling storylines, or so it seems. There are certain predicaments which you would assume would be the end for individuals who suffer such a fate, and yet because it is soap opera entertainment, somehow they just come back. I mean, I've seen The Undertaker bury people alive, and then after a few weeks it turns out that person is fine. I suppose as soon as the camera went off, the dead man got his shovel and rescued them. He likely didn't want to go to jail. Amazingly though, while death sounds pretty bad, there are some twists and turns that are even worse. I bet Kane would have preferred to have been murdered than being accused of being a necrophiliac, and I bet Hector Guerrero felt the same. The dancing gobbledygooker or shot out of a cannon. I'll take the latter, please. However, sometimes you're just not that lucky. I'm Simon from What Culture. Please do hit that subscribe button. This is 10 wrestling fates worse than death. Number 10, Linda McMahon in a coma. Vince McMahon was the WWE's biggest heel for years. He decided to take a maniacal approach to running his company, and as such, his wife Linda soon called him on his madness. It even led to a McMahon in every corner at WrestleMania 2000. Such was the hate between the family. Understandably, Linda soon wanted a divorce, but Vince had put her through such emotional hell, she suffered a breakdown and fell into a coma, or at least went into a comatose state. Taking advantage of this, Vince decided he would keep her like this using sedative drugs, and for the younger listeners, this is all 100% true. Even then though, he continued to emotionally abuse her, including having an affair with Trish Stratus right in front of his wife. She was unable to move in a wheelchair, meaning while she could see Vince making out with Trish, she couldn't do anything about it. Daughter Stephanie would also get in on the act, as would son-in-law Triple H, who would routinely beat up son Shane just to make this all even worse. Thankfully, this wasn't permanent, and it did lead to a pretty big reaction when she got her mojo back at WrestleMania 17, and I'm 99% sure if this was going to be the rest of your life in reality, you'd rather someone just ended it then and there. Number 9, The Undertaker's streak ends. When Brock Lesnar stunningly beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania 30, fans could not believe it. They were so shocked they thought it was a mistake, and watching the moment back now is fascinating. Don't you tell me wrestling can't be real in the modern day. Whether or not this was a good idea is still widely debated, but there remains a huge portion of fans that think it was an error, and on top of that if we were going to do it, it should have been here when The Undertaker retired for good. It was the saddest but most fitting end after a streak that'll never be topped. Now, I'll admit I don't buy into that, and someone that has given so much to wrestling should be allowed to fight forever if they want, but it is fair to say most of his matches after this weren't the dead man spectacle we'd been used to, and seeing him beat Bray Wyatt or that match with Goldberg in Saudi Arabia, well, it didn't help anything. In fact, neither should have happened to begin with. So yes, in that sense, if the Phenom had finally put his character to rest in 2014, it would have been better, and maybe even a more fitting end. It would also be leaving the business on your back, which is the time-honored tradition, but hey, look at it this way. If we had done that, we wouldn't have gotten the Boneyard match. There is always a positive spin. Number 8, Vince sees Stone Cold become the boss. Austin versus McMahon may be the best feud ever. You can argue that, but it's up there, and it generated so much revenue for WWE, it went on for years. Most of it was pretty damn good too, especially when the Rattlesnake got screwed out of his title at Over the Edge. This all tied into the ludicrous McMahon who's the higher power storyline, which made no sense, but it did give us this doozy, which was excellent. In order to get his revenge, Steve Austin had made a deal with then CEO Linda McMahon, who, to get back at her awful husband, had given control of the company to none other than the bionic redneck, and yes, Vince almost died. And that was the whole point too. McMahon's shtick was that he abused his position of power, so when that was taken away and given to his mortal enemy, he looked like he wanted to be finished off right there and then. All of it resulted in some excellent skits between the two, and while it didn't last that long, it was a great way to have Stone Cold get one over Vince without them having to fight. If you haven't seen Steve Austin's first day in charge, I strongly suggest you change that today. His phone etiquette especially is worth it. Number 7, Tory Wilson, Al Wilson, and Dawn Marie. In 2002, Tory Wilson and Dawn Marie started a feud that would be the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. Let us begin. After Tory had defeated Dawn in a bikini match, Marie decided she would get her revenge by dating Wilson's dad, Al. It all led to a normal match between the two, and because Dawn lost again, she ranked up this relationship by ensuring they got engaged. This then took a nuts turn when Dawn promised to call this off if Tory slept with her, and while that did lead to some soft porn airing on WWE TV, Marie was still talking crap and went ahead and married Al on SmackDown. He then died, in storyline, after having super racy sex with his new wife. I mean, what the flub? It ended with a stepdaughter versus stepmother match at the Royal Rumble of all places. I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. Thankfully, it only went 4 minutes and then we were done. All of this was bonkers though, as Tory got it from all angles, including having to go through the shenanigans of a fake father dying. can only imagine at one point she would have rather been on the other side of that narrative. Number 6, Raven and Beulah. The whole Raven character in ECW was great. A childhood friend of Tommy Dreamer, they had grown apart as Tommy had gone on to be the popular jock, whereas Raven was the shunned outcast. Beulah McGillicuddy was then introduced as someone who fancied Dreamer when they too were younger, but was rejected because according to the story, she was too fat. Fast forward to today and she was a penthouse model, whereas Raven was out for revenge. The two made sure to make Tommy Dreamer's life a nightmare. Despite all of this though, do you know how it went? Even after all three had fought, even after Tommy had admitted to all of this, even after Raven had started to neglect Beulah, meaning he was to blame, it ended with Dreamer and McGillicuddy getting married, having children, being happy, while poor Raven was left to ask, well, what about me? It just sets him up as such a tragic figure, which was the idea, and given that he did look miserable from start to finish, well, he likely would have preferred anything else to yet more heartbreak. Number 5, Festus. So this was offensive, also crazy, as Festus was portrayed by Luke Gallows, which is almost unbelievable in many ways. As for the character, brace yourself. Part of a tag team with Jesse between 2007 and 2009, Festus was meant to be mentally challenged until he heard the bell ring. This would for some reason transform him into the best wrestler ever until the match was done, then it was back to dribbling, and I do mean that literally. It took an interesting twist when CM Punk saved him for his straight edge society, revealing that he wasn't in this state because of his brain, but because he had been drugged all of this time. Who wrote this? The blame went on his tag partner and family, who apparently were all to blame, but the biggest issue is it took Gallows years to shake it because it was so bad. The man himself has spoken about this on podcasts and how stunned he was when Vince McMahon pitched the character to him, and I suppose it's just more proof that WWE will actually do anything even though they really shouldn't. Number 4, Bray Wyatt's world burns. The Wyatt compound was Bray's metaphorical heart. He talked about it all the time, said it was where he sought refuge and where he would get mad about being Husky Harris. It was his everything. So when Randy Orton pretended to be on the same page as him in 2016 and then betrayed him and burned down his shed, well, it left Wyatt in a pretty bad state to the point he's still talking about it today. He cannot get over it. It caused him to break down and kind of reimagine himself as the Fiend, but honestly, go and watch him talk about this, reflect on this, think about this. It was the worst thing that could have happened to him, and ended up with him dressing up as a woman and saying he was Sister Abigail. I still don't really know what that was. But given that it crushed him from the inside and forced him to come up with yet another alter ego, well, this is some pretty serious stuff, and really you should feel quite sorry for him. He is doing alright at the moment though, because he does have a new best friend in Alexa Bliss, and they never ever do anything normal at all. Number 3, Ric Flair is forced to retire. Ric Flair the wrestler and Ric Flair the man are one and the same. Not only have other wrestlers said this, but the Nature Boy admits it all the time. He loved his gimmick for better and for worse. The problem with this though is that he did live it. As well as being most home within the ring, he was obsessed with his jet flying lifestyle, so when WWE told him it was time to wrap it up, he was devastated. It's why even after he had retired after his WrestleMania match with Shawn Michaels, he gave it a while and then restarted in TNA. He just couldn't give it up. The point though is that Flair has said in interviews that he saw this as a fate worse than death when it happened, so how can we argue against it now? Thankfully he has found peace with it ever since, which is something he has earned, and let's face it, will the memory of Ric Flair actually ever go away? Of course not. He is the best ever. Number 2, John Cena's trapped in the Firefly Funhouse, and he's still there in terms of the story. Bray Wyatt won that match and we've not heard anything since, so Cena is lost in the Firefly Funhouse, which also kind of means he's lost in his own head. That sounds horrible to me. The whole match was meant to crush John mentally, and it worked, as we brought up all his failures and mistakes throughout his career. He even touched on his failed engagement to Nikki Bella, which did feel especially close to the bone. Hopefully Cena will be holding on to his catchphrase that you should never give up, and will find his way back to planet Earth at some point. If not, well, remember the title of this video? Would you want to be stuck in your own thoughts and pretending you're in the New World Order? Actually, that doesn't sound that bad. Number 1, Bret loses the title in Montreal. Maybe this one is a little strong, but man, does it hurt. Bret Hart suffered such emotional damage from the Montreal Screwjob that it took him years to get over, and even today you could say it still affects him a little. How could it not? Aside from the deception by a company he had given years of his life to, it was the fact he had asked and been granted permission not to lose in Montreal, Canada, and certainly not to Shawn Michaels, a man he had a bit of real-life feud with. This was all agreed upon before Vince McMahon changed his mind and pulled a fast one. The Hitman was crushed. Hart would go on to WCW, who didn't have a clue what to do with him, and in Bret's own words, what WWE did to him here was the equivalent of blowing the character's brains out. I mean, do I really need to say any more? No, No, I do not. Know of any other wrestling fates that were worse than death? Make sure you let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share the video, and smash that subscribe button. Then head over to whatculture.com where you can read articles like this. Follow What Culture on Twitter, WhatCultureWWE, so you can stay up to date with wrestling and watch more videos here on What Culture Wrestling. My name is Simon from What Culture. I appreciate you giving me a click, and I will talk to you again very soon.